Hi, everyone. This is a special edition of Hallmark Movie Drafts. We just finished recording our March show, which is the Hallmark Cousins mashup, where guest panelists drafted the top 10 list of Hallmark movies featuring either Tyler Hynes or his cousin-in-law, Andrew Walker. We've done a Tyler Hynes exclusive top 10 draft back in March of 2023. And honestly, there must be something about March and Tyler Hynes that is connected to me in my head. I don't know why, I don't know what, but regardless, this is where we are. So it prompted me to connect with my guest today to have a conversation with her about her work in documentary film, about her work in the Hallmark universe, and how those two worlds are coming together in a new film project that she's working on. My guest today is filmmaker and producer Jennifer Silliman, who rom-com and Hallmark fans may know as the creator and host of the podcast series Hearts of Stars. And throughout that series, Jen sits down with beloved actors for relaxed, candid conversations that go beyond the movies and into their lives, passions, and the causes that they care about. Before launching Hearts of Stars, Jen also worked in documentary filmmaking and was a producer on the maternal mental health documentary Dark Side of the Full Moon. So whether she's telling meaningful real-world stories or connecting fans with the stars that they love, Jen's work is all about building community through storytelling, and I'm really excited to have her here today. Jen, welcome to Hallmark Movie Drafts. I'm so looking forward to our chat.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we dive into the new documentary, I'd love to hear your origin story. Like, what first drew you into storytelling and filmmaking?
Yeah, so I went to school for speech communication broadcasting. And what's unique about my degrees, usually they are a Bachelor of Arts, but the school that I went to is actually a Bachelor of Science. So we dug real deep into like communication theory and all of those things. And I was like, ooh, I really like this. And I had always wanted to be like on the news. I don't know. It was like so from a very young age. I was like, oh, I'd love to be on the news. So while I was in college, I actually worked at our local news station. And so I started working in the field before I even graduated from college. I was lucky enough to get a position and really start learning all the ins and outs of broadcasting and working in a newsroom. And I worked in a newsroom during 9/11, which was for me it was something that I will never forget being in the newsroom when that was happening and all the stories that came out of it. Stories of first responders, stories of spouses, stories of victims, all of those things. And just kind of the how powerful someone's voice can be. And I learned really quickly that notion. And I was like, I want to tell more stories. I want to tell the stories of people that maybe no longer have the ability to tell their own story, and I want to make sure that they're told. So that's kind of where it all started. And then just personal experiences have happened where I did Dark Side of the Full Moon because I was dealing with my own postpartum depression, maternal mental health issues. I'm an open book. Like you'll learn this throughout the interview. You'll probably learn stuff about me that you don't even really care to know. But I don't. I just that's just how I am, and because of the feedback that I get, right? I get, oh, I went to therapy because of you, or oh, I reconnected with this friend because you talked about forgiveness, or whatever it is. And so that's kind of how I got into it, and I've fallen in love with it more and more as time has progressed with these film projects.
You have touched on so many things that I can relate to. Looking for the deeper meaning behind the
Mhm.
thing. The whole tie into 9/11 is particularly personal because my husband and I got married 11 days after 9/11. We lost a lot of people. So I'm so glad that that was something that sort of, inspired you to take that to take that next step. It's certainly something in America's history that's going to stay with us for a long time, absolutely. When you first did the dark side of the full moon, what did making that film teach you about telling meaningful stories and how they can have an impact?
Yeah, I think because of the topics that are in Dark Side of the Full Moon, they are already topics that are so stigmatized: mental health, motherhood, and those two things coming together, which don't typically go together. Dealing with my own experience with it, and how traumatizing that was for me. I had actually started a support group before doing the film, and it was in sharing my story at a support group, and I share the story every time, and it still gives me goosebumps. I was leaving that support group as the host, and a mom stopped me in the parking lot, and she said, "You had mentioned that they put you on medicine. Would you mind telling me what it was?" And I don't typically like to tell people like what medicine I was on, but for whatever reason, I just felt like really drawn to her, and I told her, and it was essentially an antipsychotic drug for intrusive thoughts that I was having. And she goes, "Well, I just have to tell you that I have a prescription for that medication in my purse, and I wasn't going to go get it filled because I googled it, and I'm like, I'm not any of these things, so I don't want to take this, but I'm going to go right now and get this filled so I can get better." And I was like, wow. Like, just sharing, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm just a mom who was sharing her story. And that was really powerful for me. And the way that I got together with the filmmaker that I did that documentary with is a story all in itself. So I encourage people to go check it out. It was just so serendipitous of how we came together and that how this unfolded. And I wanted to scream it from the mountaintops about what was happening to moms, and they weren't, falling through the cracks with having mental health issues and them not being addressed in the hospital setting and by doctors and whatnot. So that documentary taught me that documentaries can have a really big impact. That film is still being shown at OBGYN residency programs so that upcoming OBGYNs can learn what the consequences are when moms and families are not asked certain questions, and things are kind of just shoved under the rug, or moms aren't being taken seriously, and what that can look like and how devastating that can be. So I'm really proud of that film for it turning into this piece of like an educational thing, which we never thought it would. That's pretty powerful. And I was like, I could keep doing this. It's not, I mean, it was 2 years of my life and you make $0 doing documentary films, but I was like, I want to do this again. Like, let's do this again. And then, that was 10 years ago. We started filming that November of 2012, and it came out in 2015. And I hadn't touched a camera really, except for my iPhone, in almost 10 years. And there's a couple of reasons why. It was just very triggering for me to deal with anything mental health related. I had a relapse and started going through my own things again, and just really couldn't touch that subject. But then I found a kind of a happy subject that turned into kind of a not happy. So I don't know. It's very strange. But the Hallmark Channel brought me a lot of joy, and then it kind of ballooned from there.
That is the perfect segue, because as you were speaking, I'm thinking, well, this is a big, big
Sure.
leap from, the very serious and important issue of mental health to Hallmark movies. Wait, what
What?
happened here? Because I figured, along the way, at some point, you discover Hallmark movies. You've got this incredibly difficult time in your life. What do you think it was about Hallmark films that kind of resonated with you at that time?
Yeah, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and all of those things. And they always say, and I've of course have taken deep dives into like what the meaning of all of this is. But one of them being, a lot of people with anxiety tend to watch the same shows over and over again because they know what to expect and they know how it's going to end. And for them, it's just a little less stressful. And what is so nice about the Hallmark Channel is that I don't have to watch the same movie over and over again. I can watch every movie. And I know how each one's going to end. So it kind of opens up the library to some more stories rather than, just watching Friends over and over again or watching one particular movie over and over again. For me, it was great. I could turn on the Hallmark Channel and not worry about anything. Anything that popped up on that channel, it was going to be safe. And I think that's what initially drew me to it. And then I was like, oh, these people are so nice. I wonder if they're actually really nice in real life off the set. And then that's how the podcast kind of started from there.
Well, it's all well and good to say, well, that's how the podcast started from there. But there are millions and millions of Hallmark movie watching fans who, don't have a podcast or who
Yeah.
don't sit down every week or every month to talk to their hall stars and learn about their favorite causes. So tell us a little bit about how you actually did get started with Hearts of Stars, because those are such meaningful conversations.
Yeah, and I think the first thing I asked myself was, how can I make myself be different than all the other podcasts? Because there were a good amount of Hallmark podcasts, people reviewing films and things like that. And I said, well, I want to do something a little bit different. And I thought, well, let's talk about something that's close to their heart, whether it's a charity or just a story that they want to share that's not related to them filming or acting or anything like that, which hence the name Hearts of Stars. I really wanted to figure out what was in their heart and have that resonate through the podcast to the listeners. So that's kind of how it started. And I was lucky enough to have it turn into a TV show for a few seasons, which was fun while it lasted. It's not lucrative to film a show like that. It was so much fun. And at the time, which is really, this is really an interesting point, was, the Hallmark stars were never on Jimmy Fallon and like the late night shows. We were never seeing them like we were seeing other celebrities that had movies coming out. And I wanted to do that for them. I wanted to be the Jimmy Fallon of, let's play games with them. Let's like do things that bring out who they really are. And it's so interesting because that has changed so much over the last 3 years. I mean, the PR department, who I'm friends with a lot of them that are in that department, I mean, it's unbelievable where they show up now. And I think it's fantastic because I think the fans really like to see them in a way we don't typically see them. I mean, really, the only other place you could see them was on a podcast or hear them on a podcast. They weren't doing any other publicity things with their movies, and now they are, which I love so much. I think it's really good for them, and teaming up with the NFL and the Kentucky Derby and all these things. Holy moly, the audience has just gotten so much bigger, which is fantastic. But yeah, that's how the podcast started, and I really do enjoy it. I haven't done a lot of it now because of the film, but I really do enjoy talking to them about those things. And I like giving them that opportunity as well to do that because I don't think they get that chance a lot. So I wanted to, give them that platform to do that.
This is a beautiful thing. It's not just at fan events, but you can see them popping up, doing all kinds of things across all different socials
Yeah.
as well. I really have noticed that Hallmark has become used generically for rom-coms, sort of like Kleenex, even though it's trademark. Someone doesn't usually say, hand me a tissue. They say, hand
Yeah.
me a
Hand me a facial
Kleenex,
tissue.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, hand me a facial tissue. Not going to
Yeah.
work.
Right.
No one's
Right. Right.
really
Right.
saying, let's go watch an up TV movie. Do you watch Hallmark movies? And then they proceed to name something that's not a Hallmark movie, but it's a
Right.
rom-com. And I think that really speaks to just how much that movie watching community has grown. It's just sort of its own thing now.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
helps
it's
a
like
lot
its
of
own
people.
term. Hallmark is more than just Hallmark media. Hallmark means all kinds of things. And you're right, people use it kind of interchangeably with other things. What do you want to watch tonight? Let's watch, a Hallmark
Let's
movie.
watch it.
And you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be on Hallmark, but it means a rom-com, or it means something safe, or it means something
Yeah.
that's really light and just we know what's going to happen and has a little love story in it. It's kind of a term that's used more in generalities, right? To
Right.
describe so many
Yeah.
different
Nine times
things.
out of 10, it's, Love Actually. So
Love
there it
Actually.
is. Right? All right. So you've spent a lot of times around Hallmark actors and the fans at different events, different areas. What is it that you think makes Hallmark movie fans different from fans in other entertainment industries?
Well, the demographic is a big one. I always go to that first because that's the most noticeable visually, just kind of looking at the crowds. I mean, very different than if I showed up to like a Taylor Swift concert, right? Which is its own kind of clear demographic. However, no judgment. I've never been, but I would go at my age. But yes, the Hallmark community, and not just lending itself to an older demographic, it's more the range. I'm really starting to see younger folks, teenagers who are just as intense about some of the Hallmark actors as the 85-year-old great great grandma who is there and has been watching Hallmark for a decade and is also very intense with the way she feels about some of these Hallmark actors. The demographic is just so unique. And that's what really kind of first tweaked my interest as to what's the reason behind some of these people who are just kind of so intense. With Tyler Hynes, obviously where I started, because I wasn't even watching him. I didn't even know who he was the first time I showed up to a fan event where he was. I had no idea who he was, and I told him that it's like a whole story. Like I've never watched any of your movies. I have no idea who you are, but there's like 1,000 people in line waiting to meet you. What is happening? Like what is this? I don't even know you. Like but all these women do. So I'm like, who are you? I want to know who you are. And that's kind of where it started. And I think that's what makes the Hallmark fandom so different than others, because the age range is incredible.
So you're at a fan event, you see these long lines of people. I've never attended a fan event. It's not my vibe, but friends have been at least once, twice, or 13 times already. So I've seen the videos. I've heard their stories about waiting in line for hours. When did you realize, after you encountered Tyler Hynes and you saw this firsthand, when did you realize that fandom is a story worth telling?
That's a very good question.
Thank
When I
you.
started,
Thank you, Jen.
you're welcome. Yeah, I feel like I don't tell my podcast host that enough, but that was a very good question. When I initially saw everybody, and it was kind of just a visual of the different ages and all of that, and that actually technically was my first Hallmark fan event where there was more than one person that you were meeting. There were like multiple stars there at this event.
Which
And
event was it? So
Drama in West Palm Beach
I'm so
in
small.
2022. I think it was 2022, because it had gotten canceled because of COVID and they had pushed it and pushed it. I live in South Florida, so it was literally 10 miles from my house. And my husband did not have an idea for a birthday present. And I was like, oh, I'll take the VIP package to meet some of these people that I think I've seen in some of the movies that I've watched. That would be great. So that's how I ended up getting there. And really just diving a little bit deeper and like meeting them. Obviously, you can probably tell that I'm a chatterbox and I'll make friends with anybody. And so even before I had this inkling of a documentary, although I did say it that weekend back in 2022, some of these women were talking to me and I said, oh boy, this would make a really good documentary film, because wow, some of these stories are just wild. The women like showing me like a tattoo of his signature on their leg, and then learning their name, like the Hynies. I was like, what? And they had like wooden placards that somebody made with his face, wood burned onto it with hashtag Hynies. And so for me, it was like, this has the resemblance of some sort of organized religion. It's got merchandise, it's got a name, it's got like vocabulary that they know, like it's very wow. And I had never encountered that before with anything. I can call myself a groupie. I grew up in the 80s and I was a big New Kids on the Block fan, and all that stuff, and then all the boy bands in the 90s and all of that.
Thank God they're all coming back.
I know, right? And they're all coming back because it was such a good time in this world, good music and good times and less stress and less dumpster fires. But I just don't remember having that. I mean, I remember buying things like posters and buttons and stuff, but it became very clear that social media made a difference in how these fans connected, not only to each other, but to who they were so intense on meeting and learning more about and following and watching on their TV screen. I mean, that was the one piece that was missing from the 90s.
We
You
didn't have
only
that.
knew we didn't have that. Like if I didn't know you were a Jordan Knight fan unless I went to school with you and you told me. There were no Jordan Knight fan clubs online. We hand wrote fan mail to see if we'd get an autographed picture back, unless they ended up on Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood. You didn't have a view inside their world at all. They didn't know what they were doing, in their
No.
free time.
And we could do a whole separate conversation on parasocial relationship things. But at these events where you're seeing Tyler, you're seeing these fans, you're seeing these long lines, is there something What do you think Tyler Hynes does that makes his fans feel so personally seen in a way that's different from most of the other celebrities or actors? Because there's got to be something.
Yes, I will tell you what it is because I've heard it a million times, and I this is exactly what they say to me. There are thousands of people here, and when he looks at me, I am the only person in this room. And I have heard it hundreds of times. In fact, when I went to meet him for the first time, that's what a fan told me. You don't you cannot explain it until you've experienced it. And I was like, no. Like, I don't even know this guy. How is he gonna make me feel like the only person in the room? I've never even watched a movie. And I'll be darned, he did it. I don't know how,
You
but he
experienced it?
has.
Yeah.
I experienced it firsthand. It's true. And then watching him, and it's been so nice to watch him then through the lens of knowing that I'm telling this story now, which makes the experience totally different when I'm watching him interact with fans. He really does do that. And it is different than some other fans that I've seen interact with other stars. For whatever reason, and I don't know how he does it, but he is able to make that fan feel like there's no one else here. He remembers things about fans. I've heard that a lot, where a fan will come to next year's Christmas Con and he remembers something that I said last year or remembers. And I don't know how he does that, but he does. And it's incredible. It's just really incredible. And he makes you feel like the only person in the room. And I think that really resonates with a lot of people, especially now learning the backstories of a lot of these mostly women who I've been interviewing and who I've talked to who wait in these long lines to see him every year. They all have some sort of backstory that is tragedy, that is grief, that is loneliness, that are those things. And I think that connection is the reason why it resonates so deeply with them, because they are looking for that. And I don't think a lot of them ever think they would find it in someone they're waiting in a line for that they've only seen on their TV screen. And yet he's able to do that. And it's powerful. And I think that's why his fandom is as big as it is, because he's able to do that. And I've heard, I mean, there are people, women that are just as intense who have never met him before. And so for that reason, I'm just like, wow, you've never even met him. Oh, yeah, but I've seen videos and my other Heine friends have told me that, he's just so nice. And so the intensity is still there, even if they haven't had that face to face hug, his famous hugs. And it's incredible. And I was like, I need to tell this story. Like these story and these individual stories are so important, because it's when we started getting all the stories in, you started seeing all the threads that follow through all of these stories. And again, grief is one of them, loneliness is one of them, and anxiety and mental health issues. And it's just, it all connected. I felt really connected to that too, because I somewhat had that experience as well. But to have it all pinpointed on one actor, I was like, what is that? Like, what does he have that this person doesn't have? And it was, they have their own name. I mean, it's
So,
incredible.
exactly. So for listeners, we have listeners in 52 countries around the world. Some of them
Nice.
are really devout Tyler Hynes fans. Others have other favorites. So, listeners, Jen is saying Hynies, that is the self-proclaimed name of some of his most ardent fans. How would you describe that community? Like if I said, Jen, just give me three adjectives for the Hynies community, even though there's probably like a million.
Million. Yeah.
Yeah.
Intense community and acceptance.
Oh, acceptance. That's interesting. I've never met Tyler Hynes. But one thing that I believe to be true about him for some reason, just from things that I've seen, is he seems very authentic, very genuine, and very welcoming to all in a genuine, authentic way. So I love that you said acceptance, because in his Instagram, that's something that he talks about, keeping it on the positive,
Yeah.
lifting each other up, building up this community. So you meet Tyler Hynes, you're surrounded by these fans, you're hearing all of these incredible stories, your filmmaker brain is on overload. How does this all come together to get this project started?
Yeah. So, it was on the back burner for like 3 years. I had had the whole revelation at Rama Drama back in 2022 and then didn't really speak of it again. I had a full time job at the time. I wasn't really concentrating on filmmaking at all anymore, but I was doing the podcast just because, I really do like the interview process. And I was like, well, this is an easy, inexpensive way to continue to do that without actually, filming anything. And so I did that, which is how Hearts of Stars started. And then realizing that the Hallmark stars were really accessible. I mean, that was something that was so different too. I could reach out to some of them. Now it's not really like that anymore, but I was able to reach out to someone on Instagram and they would just respond. And I was like, oh, I can get these guests and talk to them about all these things. What transpired in July of last year, I had gone on the Hallmark Christmas cruise, the very first one, like the inaugural cruise. I had never gone on a cruise before. I found out fairly early that I am not a cruise person. So thank goodness there was the Hallmark benefit, because I was like, I don't think being stuck on a boat is my cup of tea. Let's just say I was in the casino the entire trip. I made friends with all of the casino people. Like, it was so nice. Anyway,
Oh my gosh.
so I went on the Hallmark Christmas cruise and then I did the Hallmark Christmas experience in Kansas City. And again, not even really thinking about the documentary at all. Then I went to Christmas in a Small Town, which is hosted in Dahlonega, Georgia, by a company called Decade Days. And I had reached out to them because I wanted to get some experience on interviewing in person and panels, like on a stage. And it was a smaller event. So I was like, I'm just going to reach out and ask if I can host some of the panels. And they were like, sure, connect with this person. And I was like, oh, good. I get to be on a stage with a microphone. I love public speaking. It's my favorite thing in the world. So I was like, let's do this. There's some of the stars are showing up that have been on my podcast. And I was like, oh, this will be great. And then 2 weeks before the event, they announced that Tyler Hynes was going to be there. He was not on the schedule at all. And then 2 weeks before the event, they announced him and the internet blew up. They probably sold 1,000 more tickets because he was showing up. And those women just bought their expensive flights and found an Airbnb. And they're like, we're showing up no matter what. We are going. And so I went to this event, again, still with not thinking about doing a documentary. But while I was there, I met a couple people that kind of inspired me to start this project. And now they're all people that work on the film project with me. But they all had backgrounds in podcasting, broadcasting, filmmaking. And I was like, this feels right. It now feels like this is the right time to do it. And when I came back from that trip, we launched. I made sure I had my team in place, all female team. And, I was like, let's build the website. Let's start taking stories and figuring out what the story is. I knew there was a story, but I wanted to hear from the fans, because this movie was going to be about the fans. It was not going to be a Tyler Hynes documentary. That is not what I wanted to produce. I wanted to produce something that showed the fandom community that he has created and that has just taken off. And for me, the timeline was really interesting because, he had done a lot of Hallmark movies, but he didn't do his first in-person fan event until 2021. So it's not like people were seeing him and meeting him in person. He still had an intense fan base despite not doing any fan events. And I found that to be really interesting. And what I've learned now is that they all became connected with him during COVID. That's when his Facebook group started. His two biggest Facebook groups started in January of 2020, like just before COVID was about to hit in March. And I think that was somehow the catalyst for them to all stay together. And when the world opened back up, boy, they all found each other. And it just so happened that Tyler was doing an event, his first one in Nashville. And that was it. They met him in person. He turned out to be the person who they were hoping he was going to be, and then some. And it was just, and that was it. And I find that absolutely incredible. And that I didn't even know until I really started digging into these stories. I mean, I think we had 50 stories sent to us within the first 48 hours of asking for Heine stories, just like that. And you can easily put them all into AI and be like, hey, what are the common themes here? And it populated all of them. And I said, I had an idea that this is what they were going to be. And yeah, and it kind of took off from there.
And you probably correlated it to an uptick in tattoo bookings near,
Tattoo bookings and
near the
absolutely.
fan events.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's the beautiful, uplifting side of what you started out with. But somewhere along the way, at some point, as you're collecting these fan stories, you began hearing stories about scammers impersonating Tyler online. When did you really notice that that was becoming an important part of the story? Because I've got to tell you, for the Hallmark Movie Drafts Instagram, I am constantly getting rid of, and I can't do it anymore because, we're close to a thousand organic followers. I don't do paid ads or
Right.
boosts or anything. But I have to tell you, easily 15 a week. There's a Tyler underscore whatever. And it's on TikTok. It's absolutely everywhere. It's like whack-a-mole. You get rid of one,
Another one
another one
pops up.
pops up. And it's not just Tyler. It's Andrew Walker, it's Brennan Elliott. It seems to be mostly impersonators who do male Hall stars. I haven't seen a lot of,
Mhm.
female imposters online. That's not to say that they don't
They
exist,
don't
but
exist,
but
right?
at some point, as you're collecting these amazing stories of connectivity and community and these positive things, you come across other stories.
I do. And the first real inkling of it was a fan that reached out to me that said, I keep track of all the fake Tyler accounts. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. How many are there? And they're like, oh, we've closed over 800. I have an Excel spreadsheet of probably 3,000. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? And she's like, no. So I was like, okay. So there's obviously something very lucrative for these scammers if they keep creating impersonating profiles of him specifically. Like, what is it with him? And that's when I asked her, I said, do you have anyone who'd be willing to share their experience with me? And when I read the first story, and I was like, this cannot be true. Like, there is just no way that this happened. And it was a handwritten, it was like an email or something that somebody sent to me. I was like, I need to start interviewing these people on Zoom. I need to see them. Oh my gosh, I just can't believe that this would happen. And sure enough, I mean, these are well educated people that just became a victim of this scammer who was so believable to them. And I was like, okay, so we definitely have to put it in the movie, but it's just going to be a little thing. Like, I don't want this to be this big thing because this isn't the movie. Like, this is very negative. This is not what I want in the film. But I said, we have to address it. We can't not address it, especially after Hallmark addressed it, right? In their PSA. I was like, and Hallmark's letting me put some footage in the movie. And I was like, I kind of feel like I need to address it. And with that, we started getting flooded with scam stories, and they were just scam stories. It was all negative. And I'm like, oh my, these women, and it was, I've never gotten a story from a man, so I'll just say women. These women losing their life savings, remortgaging their home, losing a spouse who, the husband finds out that she's having these private messages, turns out not to even be I mean, I was just flabbergasted. And I was like, oh boy, I feel like I have some sort of responsibility here that I need to, change the world with this. I thought for sure if I did this documentary, there would be no social action piece to it. It was like, wow, clearly there's a social action piece to this. So now we need to do this whole thing. But I was like, I can't do this by myself. there's just way too much to do with this film for us to really focus on it. And with that said, within serendipitously, or this girl slid into my DMs and was like, "Hey, I love what you're doing about the scam stuff." I had a family member who was scammed, not by a Hallmark actor, but was scammed by somebody and lost a lot of money. I love what you're doing. I'd love to help or get involved in any way. I looked her up and she lives in LA and she's amazing. And she's now my creative executive producer. And she has been interviewing these women that have been scammed. And I said, this is a much bigger piece. And in fact, well, I guess this could be breaking news on your podcast, that we are actually going to do a short documentary just about the scammers. I feel like the AI scammers stories are just so big right now. I feel anytime I watch the news, whether it's local or national or whatever, they're talking about AI and scammers. And I'm just like, people need to be aware of what's going on. And I think the last place that people would think that it's happening is to Hallmark fans. But when you think about it, it's the perfect demographic. They're usually going through something. I mean, they are. I was when I was going through it. And, we have a lot of women who are now widows who are turning to Hallmark Channel. So they're already in that vulnerable spot. They're not tech savvy. A lot of them have never even been on social media until they found out about Tyler, and then find out that he posts a lot. So like, oh, I want to get on Instagram. Oh, I want to get on Facebook so I can see what he's posting, him and his dog and vacations. And I want to see that too. And so they don't know. They don't even know about scams, let alone how to work social media. So it's the perfect storm. And I think they figured it out. And I've talked to people who work with trying to help these victims. And she told me, and this was actually just last night, she said, I work with a lot of these victims, and I can tell you that even though Tyler Hynes isn't like Tom Cruise, he gets more impersonators than any actor I've ever seen.
I believe it. The whole AI thing and the different social platforms, some try to do their best in removing accounts when they're reported. Others, it's like talking to a wall. If you're not familiar with the socials, it's very easy to see that little check mark that's maybe the wrong shade of blue or it's the wrong shape. So you think that, Tyler underscore 473986. I mean, even just the numerology of it. So
Yeah.
you brought up having this creative director who's handling some of these interviews for the scammer stories. My background in PBS television, there's also this sort of ethical responsibility in sharing stories about victims. How are you approaching that? What's your take on that?
So it's very important. We obviously don't want to exploit anyone. Since I have an extended background on mental health and like all those things, and this is why we want to interview them on Zoom and really get a feel for how they share the story. And so far, it's been a delight. These women clearly are well educated. Some are older, some it's very clear that they did not know how to use social media. And so, we always tell them this is a safe space for you to share whatever you want to or what you don't want to. If we ask you a question, and I'll be honest with you, Lynn, I have not had to ask a lot of questions. They
Oh, I'm
I'm
sure
like, just
just
share your experience, bloop, 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 and it just all kind of
yeah.
comes out because they haven't shared it with anybody before. Typically, when they're telling us, it's the first time they're telling anyone. So I think for them, it's a little therapeutic just to kind of get it off your chest. And at the same time, we try to tell them not to have any shame for this. I share with them, listen, this is not an exaggeration. I've talked to 20 women that have said the exact same thing. So it's not just you. This woman also sent a box of cash to Las Vegas to a name that she did not know, but apparently it was to fund Tyler's independent film project. Boxes of money. I mean, thousands of dollars. I said, I bet you if I got the address, it's the same one, it's the same person. And so I tell them, listen, you are being targeted. Like they're targeting you from whatever you posted on social, whether you've just lost your husband, you're going through a divorce, your kids are off to college, you're an empty nester, your dog just died. I mean, it could be anything. And they just grab onto it. And luckily, a lot of these women have saved the messages. So I have folders of messages, screenshots, and they're all the same. They all use the same language, and it is his language. They've learned it. They know what he says. They know he uses the white heart emoji a lot, so you see that an awful lot in his messages. They've studied him so much. I try to flip the table and be like, how much is Tyler putting out there that they're able to emulate him so much that it's so believable? And I don't feel like he's really doing that. I think this is just what I think, in my opinion, because his interactions in person are so genuine. I think it's really hard for these women to think that it's not him, that it is him, right? He he knows what I wore because these women are posting pictures of what they wore at Christmas con. So then the scammer can be like, I love that red sweatshirt that had the picture of me that you made. And I mean, so we're giving them a lot of information, but at the same time, these women remember their interactions with him. And that's not to say that Tyler should be meaner when he meets his fans. It's just be mindful, right? That anything that is out there on social media is research for them. And believe you me, they are looking at it. They know where he is. I mean, some of these stories, this woman was talking to who she thought was Tyler for quite a long time and was like, I'm going to show up to Christmas Con and see if he recognizes me. And she showed up to Christmas Con. Obviously, Tyler didn't know who she was, but the scammer was still texting her in the evening, even though he knew that she was like, he goes, oh, yeah, I know. I saw you today. And yes, I know we got a picture, but my management was close by. So I couldn't pretend like I knew you, but I saw you and I'm exhausted because I met so many people today. And it's just like in real time, they're scamming people. It is like whack a mole and they're popping up everywhere. It's a lucrative business for them. They are able to scam and get money, I guess, rather easily from this audience and his fans. There must be scammer people that follow him because this scammer knows what he's doing every time. So that fan specifically was talking to the scammer during the Hallmark Christmas cruise. Now, she was not on the cruise, but this scammer took a picture, AI generated, of
Yes.
Tyler in his cabin on the cruise ship with no clothes on and sent it to her. But luckily, she deleted it. I don't want to see it anyway. But she's like, I knew he was on the cruise at the time because it was all over socials. And that scammer sent me a picture of what was supposed to be Tyler in his cabin, naked. And he sent me the picture saying, I'm on the cruise. Wish you were here, blah, blah, blah.
Incredible.
Right.
Absolutely incredible. Is there any sort of prosecution that can come from maybe the scammer film that you're doing with all of this content that these victims have saved? Is there any way to find out who the different people that are doing this could lead to some sort of a court action?
We haven't dug real deep into like the legal side of that just because I think those laws and rules are different for every state and different for
Yeah.
every jurisdiction and just the little bit that I have learned about it because there are some of the fans that we talk to who are in litigation with trying to get money back. One fan was sent a check to reimburse her for the box of cash that didn't show up, but it was a stolen check. Like it wasn't even a real check. She went to cash it and they're like, yeah, this is not even real. I think some of them are having some luck, but
Not really.
I mean, that's the thing, going back to even the social media platforms, that's why the number one red flag is they comment on your post on Facebook and immediately want to put you on a private messaging app. So they immediately take you to Telegram, WhatsApp, um, Zangi, I think is one of them. So they immediately take because on the private messaging apps, there's no reporting. There's no like, oh, this phone
Right.
number is fake, report the profile. There isn't. They use real phone numbers. So yeah, there are clear red flags for sure. What I wish there was just an easy process that I could turn into a PDF and send like, here, this is exactly what you do. Here with step 1 through 5, and you're on your way to, getting your credit score higher and getting your money back. But there's just not. And I don't know if it's because laws haven't caught up to these cyber crimes that are so prevalent, but it's so sad. Some of these stories are just absolutely heart wrenching and they deserve to be told. more than just a little blurb in our fan documentary. They deserve to have their own stage where perhaps maybe something can be done, a law can be created, you know.
Jen, what do you hope viewers will take away from this fan-based documentary, but also from the other documentary that you mentioned? Do you hope viewers will be more aware of this, or maybe that Hallmark might be more aware of this,
Yeah, so well, I think the fan documentary, we call it the happy one, is that's the happy one with
the Happy
rainbows
Hynies? Yes.
and it's beautiful and it looks like a Hallmark movie. And I think people know that those fandoms around the network itself or a particular fan or whatever it may be are really safe spaces. I mean, these people really care about each other. It's a safe space. They make friends for life. I've heard that said a million times, and I've never had a sister, and now I feel like I have a whole family of sisters, and they travel together, and it's more than just going to these events. I mean, they're in each other's lives now, and I find that to be so beautiful. On the flip side, I think we have a responsibility, at least I do, and I'm just producing this documentary, that I need to protect them. I need to, create a safe space for them to be this fun loving community. And when you start seeing ways that, specifically scammers are kind of infiltrating that community and taking advantage of that community, it makes you angry. I mean, I'm angry, you know? And and so hence why we're creating a short doc just about the scamming situation, because I think the responsibility has to lie somewhere. And I don't know exactly where that is. Fans have taken it upon themselves to track the scammers and making sure that other fans know how to report. We're putting out PSAs as the film. We're creating, I mean, we're spending time doing that. None of us are being paid on this film production. It's the number one question I always get asked is, why is this film taking forever to make? Because it's not going to be out until 2027. And I say, because we all have jobs. Like, we're not just working on the Hynies documentary. We're going to school. We have jobs. We have families, all these things. It's going to take a little bit longer. But with it all being said, I've been putting blood, sweat, and tears into PSAs, to interviewing these victims, to creating graphics, taking screenshots of what things look like. We dedicate every Saturday, we call it Scammer Saturday, and we put out a PSA basically, because I'm assuming a lot of them maybe are on their phones on the weekend. We encourage, just share this information. You could stop one person from sending a box of cash to Vegas and losing their life savings. That is huge. And all you have to do is share our post.
Is that on
So,
Heine's Film, at Heine's Film on
yeah,
Instagram?
yes,
Okay. Yeah. So
yes.
listeners, pay attention to that at Heine's Film on Instagram. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll definitely share
Yeah,
that.
and that's the biggest thing, the biggest way you can contribute. We do raffles and stuff, and we do raise some money just so we can travel to film. Documentaries are not cheap to make, and you very rarely get funding for them. This is all being privately funded by all his fans, basically. We give them something in return. We do raffles, and things like that. But there has to be a way that we can protect this community better.
Yeah.
There has to be a way. And since I know that storytelling is so powerful, that PSA just has to be put in the right place. Like, where are these fans, right? They're watching Hallmark movies, right? They're in Facebook groups. They're in Tyler Hynes fan groups. So I try to post them in there as well. And that's the thing. We can find them. We know where they are. So we have to put that content in front of them so they see it and they're like, oh, okay. It might even just prevent them from going on social media, period. If they've never been on socials, and if the only reason they're going on is to follow Tyler, you can bet that if someone messages them and said, this is Tyler, they're going to be like, okay, let's go. It's not like they're on there connecting to other family members or friends. They're on there strictly to see Tyler's content. And, the belief is if I comment on his stuff enough, he'll reach out to me. And that's what happens.
And that's exactly what happens. I hope those PSAs can be picked up by Hallmark Media and used on Hallmark channels, on Hallmark platforms, all the platforms that they have. I think that would go a long way into helping to mitigate this incredibly widespread problem of imposter syndrome on the socials. Jen,
Yeah.
you did mention before I let you go, this has been
Yeah,
such an incredible conversation. You did sort of throw out the year 2027, and
I did.
as someone who produces the podcast only once a month because I have a full-time job, I have a family, I have all of this. I have a fabulous team of 6 women who help to do all the background work that is required to going into every single episode. Like you, it's independent. We are deliberately not monetized. So it's a passion project that has taken on a life of its own that we're very proud of. So I say things when someone says, "Oh, well, when are you going to do a Peter Benson draft?" I'm like, "Oh, that's scheduled for 2028." And I say it with a straight face, and they know that it's
Right,
true.
right, right. That's right.
So for you, for 2027 didn't shock me, but is that really sort of the anticipated
That is
completion
yes, that is the
for the
anticipated
happy one?
release. Yes. And to be honest, it might be pushed a little bit because we really do want to put it on the film festival circuit. We want this film, both films, to be seen by audiences that may not be watching the Hallmark Channel or in a rom-com sort of bubble. Film festivals are so good for that. They also help with distribution and things like that because we have no idea even where it's going to land for people to watch. We've gotten a lot of requests to put it on DVD so they can put it with their Tyler DVD collection. So we're going to be making DVDs for
Just going to
sure.
say, you
Yeah.
have a hard media audience
Yeah,
there.
I do. But we're hoping. I mean, we don't have a rough cut yet, and that we should have by the middle of next month, and then, we might even do some more filming at the end of this year with the next Christmas con in Kansas if we're missing anything. Everything takes triple the time when you're not just focused on the film. I mean, there's a lot of everything takes 3 times longer because we're doing other things. We're not working on it every day. And it's so funny because I'm about to put a video out saying that exact same thing. We keep getting questions like, oh my God, 2027. It's interesting. We live in a world where people are making Instagram reels on their lunch break and think they're filmmakers. And they're like, oh, I can do that in 2 seconds. Why is this taking you so long? And I'm like, oh, it is completely different. It's just not the same thing.
Yeah,
But
when I see content creator on
yeah,
somebody's social bio, I'm just like,
yeah,
wow.
right.
All right. Well, Jen, this was amazing, listeners. This was filmmaker Jen Silliman. Her upcoming documentary about the Heine fan community explores both the joy of fandom, as you've heard, and the importance of protecting fans from impersonators online. It's a reminder that Hallmark is more than movies. It's about communities, shared stories, and connection. So Jen, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your fascinating journey. I hope you'll come back again in
Oh my
2027. We
God.
can have
Anytime.
another chat. Thank you. This was fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hallmark Movie Drafts is a monthly production. Like the show? Leave us a review. Spread the word. Help Hallmark movie fans find us. Follow the show at Hallmark Movie Drafts on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Stephanie Pichelle creates the movie synopses using descriptions from IMDb or Hallmark.com as a base. Kate Baca, she creates and vets the list of eligible movies and manages our Letterboxd account called Hallmark Drafts, where you'll find the movies for each show, as well as the final top 10 lists and the panelists who drafted them, so you know who to blame. Erin Rempe and Jackie Finestone help with special projects. Erin Bass-Surmak, she creates the trivia round questions, and along with Stephanie, Kate, Erin, and Jackie, provides additional creative, research, and hosting support. Me? I'm Lynn Austin. I'm the showrunner, producer, and host. I staff the panels, manage the show topics, the production schedule, and the HMD socials, and edit and publish the podcast. Special thanks to the Deck the Hallmark podcast Double Deckers, who share their passionate opinions on these Hallmark movies that we love, or maybe not love, so much. See you next month.